We're just a couple months away from NIL changing again, but is UCF ready to lead the pack?
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. Joining me, as he does every week, is my good friend Jake Crane from Crane & Co. over at the Daily Wire. Jake, UCF led the pack, as a matter of fact, in the Big 12 in terms of preparing for the changes that are happening in NIL. We no longer have to pretend like it's not pay-for-play, because that's what it is, and it's changing. UCF seems in prime position. What do they have to do here, man, to take advantage of these new rules around NIL?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, the first thing you have to do, obviously, is have the money. The more money you have, the easier it is to obviously adjust and find avenues to be able to make it as profitable for you as possible and efficient as possible. With the ever-changing landscape of NIL, and we've had some changes here recently, the Department of Education came out and said that you basically got to divvy out any money that a school gives an athlete evenly through all sports, which is just a ridiculously stupid thing. It's your money. You should be able to choose how to spend it. But that doesn't necessarily, and I've talked with Pete Nakos and On3 about this, people that are really tapped into it, that's not necessarily going to affect the collectives, but the way the rules are changing now, it seems like the collectives could start to go by the wayside, and you can't just do deals with players through the collective, which to me is the way that this has always should have been done. Like, to me, I thought NIL was, use Bryce Young when he was at Alabama for an example. If Dr. Pepper wants to do a deal with Bryce Young, their people reach out to his people, which now you can have representation, and they do the deal, and there is no middleman. There is no university involved in it. That's the way that NIL should be done, but that's not the way we've been doing it. So if the collectives do go away, or at least lose the power to not only accumulate money, but then divvy it out how they want, if they can just accumulate the money, okay, but that really just turns into a bank, and you really don't need that if you're the school. So I like some of the changes. I mean, heck, we may not even have a Department of Education here in a couple months anyway, so I don't know how that's going to stand up when it gets divvied out. But at the end of the day, if you have enough money, which comes from the donors, which comes from the boosters, you're going to be fine either way. So it's not like you're losing money. You just have to change the way that you go about doing business.
Jake, is there an opening here for the brand deals that exist with the universities? UCF is a Nike school. For Nike to jump in and provide NIL deals directly to athletes, possibly, or is that a conflict of interest?
No, I don't think it is. I don't think that's the way it works. I don't think that's technically a conflict. If the reps from Nike want to reach out to a player at a Nike school and their reps contact his reps and they do out a deal, or bang out a deal, I don't think that's going to be a problem in the eyes of anybody, especially when we get away from the NCAA, which is going to happen here in a couple years. So I don't think it's a conflict of interest. I'll be interested to see the red tape that goes along with this. But again, we're kind of in the Wild West. Like we're building the parachute on the way down, and that's another problem. You unleash the transfer portal and NIL with no rules post-COVID. And now you're having to go back and make rules and figure it out on the fly instead of having a structure, having rules in place, understanding the yard you're playing in, and then dishing it out to everybody to do it. So I just, again, it's a crazy time. I just wanted at the end to be buttoned up, but I see no problem with using, a sponsor of your team. If Coca-Cola sponsors you and Coca-Cola wants to do a deal with a player on your team, as long as the right path is taken and the right people get in touch, I don't see that being a barrier.
Yeah, when Scott Frost got hired, the enthusiasm was high from the donors. The NIL dollars started to flow. But if you're UCF, to catch up with the leaders of the pack in this NIL thing, you may have to get creative. And that's why I wonder if there's an opening here to say, look, man, if we're going to sign brand deals for jerseys and schools. You and I know of a few schools switching their brand deals this year. Should we write into the contract, look, man, for our top players, we want NIL deals directly to help attract top level athletes to our program. I think that makes a certain sense.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, these deals don't have to be out in the public. I mean, this can be handled over dinner if we're being honest. I mean, it's a handshake and a smile because we're trying to help each other. The better my team does, the more exposure your brand gets. If we're playing in the national championship and we're a Nike school, that's a good look on the uniforms for you. So it's kind of a rising tide lifts all ships. I just laugh because the Auburn part in me, this is why Chuck Person got in trouble at Auburn basketball. And now it's about to be legal. Like this exact thing that we're talking about. It's just amazing how the pendulum has swung.
Yeah, I agree. The rules ever changing. When this started, it was supposed to just open the market for athletes to be able to do deals directly with brands. The schools got creative in helping form these collectives to help funnel money to the athletes. And now the collectives may be dying to some extent as the schools take over the process, or maybe the collectives get absorbed into the institution itself, so we can just stop pretending like this is not pay for play. Either way, if you're Scott Frost, you understand that this is part of the process, and you've got to find the dollars if you want to keep up. Coaches are out there saying, Jake, look, man, if I want a top level QB in the portal, I need $1 million. That's what it takes right now to get a top level portal QB.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, you either have the money or you don't. Regardless of the apparatus you use to dish it out, you either have the money to compete or you don't. But, when you look at a school that has the student population of a UCF, that has a location that obviously there's wealthy people that live around there, and there's a bunch of, when you wear jerseys on NASA night, I think you got a little bit of cheddar in your back pocket.
Agreed. But look, where does UCF need to rank in the Big 12 in terms of spend to compete? We're going to talk about what the Knights need to do to keep up with the ever-changing landscape of the Big 12 right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Wayfair. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC, guys. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine. Whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look start to the year, Wayfair has everything you need, all within your budget. Give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com. That's wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home, everywhere. Wayfair. Jake, look, you got to spend money, right? You said you either have the money or you don't. Kenny Dillingham came out and said, look, we ain't got no money. So we're not going to pretend like we have money, but please give me money. He said all that in the same speech. So you need money to compete. He understands it, but he's saying for right now, if you're coming to Arizona State, we've got to find other ways to attract top athletes. Now, obviously, they won the whole damn Big 12 this past year, made a college football playoff, and they didn't embarrass their conference when they got there either. Ultimately, it was one of the best quarterbacks in college football that did them in at the end, in Quinn Ewers. But if you're Arizona State, you're thinking the difference between winning that game and not winning that game was the money that Texas had to go out and get a Quinn Ewers and keep a Quinn Ewers. If you're UCF and you're Scott Frost, where do you need to rank in terms of spend in the Big 12 to consistently finish at the top of the Big 12? Because you're not going to outdevelop the top programs in college football. You need top-level players, and you need money to get them.
Well, I would say the easy answer for me is top 5. I think if you're in the top 5, you really put yourself in a position to be able to compete and get some of those missing pieces that you talk about. So anything, really, I'll even put it at top 6, but anything 7 and below, it's really going to be a struggle for you to consistently do it. Not that you can't go have a great year one year, but to consistently win, to consistently elevate, you need that slush fund to be replenished so you can rinse and repeat. But here's the problem. It's not only going to get new guys, it's keeping the guys you already have. you're paying money out of both ends right now with the way the transfer portal is set up. Now, it's funny you mentioned that off the top about Kenny Dillingham asking for money. Look, coaches are going to turn into politicians. We see this all the
Yeah.
time during campaigns. You can have tons of campaign money, but they are always asking for more. Whether it's an email, hey, $5 here, $10 there, or they're going to donor dinners, right, and asking for big sums of money, and they should. Right? They need the biggest war chest possible to go out and win these games, not only for a year, but consistently. So I would say the top 5 in the Big 12, which when you look at UCF, I don't think it's a crazy thing to say they could do that. Kind of look at some of these other schools around. So top 5, yes. Anything outside of that, you're not going to be able to year after year be uberly competitive.
Jake Crane says top 5. The Big 12, Jake, ranked 4th in terms of NIL spend as a
so it's not that hard.
Yeah, but UCF was next to last in the conference in terms of estimated NIL funding in 2024, only in front of Houston. So the top 5 in the conference currently: Iowa State, Kansas, Utah, Kansas State, and Texas Tech. I'm shocked that BYU isn't up there in this ranking because I know
they will be now.
Yeah, I know they got money, but ultimately you've got to spend money to rank. So if you're UCF, you have work to do to move up this list and make sure that you're getting the dollars. Now, winning is going to be part of that because nobody wants to give dollars to a dead program. And if you're Scott Frost, fortunately, you've generated some enthusiasm on the front end of this. But sticking with the theme of spending, you've been around athletics for a long time. So there necessarily weren't more dollars. But when these collectives formed, what happened was a lot of the money that would be donated directly to the university got diverted to NIL. So if I'm a donor and I have $1 million a year, I'm like, look, I still got $1 million for you. So you tell me you want 500 over here and 500 to the general fund. Coaches are trying to make the decision to say, do I want new facilities? Do I want new toys for my program? Or do I want money to spend on players? How do you think teams like UCF are going to handle divvying out the funds when it's all said and done, when they used to just go into a general athletics fund?
Yeah, and look, I mean, most of the people that are donating that amount of money obviously have a business. I don't think there's a lot of people that just won the lottery that are like, hey, here's $1 million. I don't have a business. I live in Europe for half the year. These people are connected to corporations and businesses. So there's a way to do it. They'll find a way to funnel the money. I'm really not worried about finding the way to funnel the money. It's just, and you hit on it, can you take advantage of the interest that was drummed up by Scott Frost getting the job? And not only that, this is why year one is so important. It's not just to get the fans behind you, but it's to get the money behind you. If you go out there and show instant progress and instant credibility and build upon what you had done there before, Scott Frost kind of has an advantage. If they go out and play well year one, those donors are going to look around and be like, oh, he's just going to do it again. So why would I not? It's a great bet. It's a great gamble to give this guy money. So this year has become even more important if the collectives do get taken away and there's changes in NIL. But really, Mike, that was going to happen either way. You got to put up or shut up when it comes to getting people's money. You go out there and lay an egg, just like if you're a hedge fund manager or a stockbroker, if you go out there and don't do well with the money that you have, how do you think you're going to get people to give you more money?
Yeah, looking at the decision to move on from Gus Malzahn, 4-8 season is definitely not going to get more funding to your program. And with the years that Gus was there, you and I have covered Gus for a long time across multiple programs. It was time to make a change because you could not afford for donor enthusiasm to start to wane, Jake, in light of where NIL is going. You've got to ratchet it up. You've got to get interest up in the program, and you've got to get people excited about the direction. Scott Frost seems to be doing that. But, hey, are these changes a good thing for UCF? Is it good for college football? We'll talk about that right after the break. Are we headed in the right direction, Jake? Is this a good thing for college football, what's happening with the schools taking autonomy over NIL? Now, you and I are old enough to remember that SMU got the death penalty.
Yeah.
Something that honestly, the NCAA vowed to never do to any program again. It broke up a conference, created a new landscape in college football because they thought that they were run rampant cheating. Now it's all legal. You and I remember Albert Means, right? And boosters running around, set Bama back years. USC.
Yeah, a Bama
Reggie
booster
Bush.
died walking up the steps. They still haven't figured that one out.
Reggie Bush, essentially sent USC to the doldrums of college football for years and years. It took them to recover from what happened while Pete Carroll was there. Is this a good thing for college football that we've got this out in the open? And are teams like UCF primed to take advantage?
Well, to your first point, do I think it's a good thing for NIL for the school to have all the autonomy? If we're talking about the collectives and just the true pay for play, no, I don't. I didn't like that structure. That's not how it works in business. But obviously, there's relationships between the sponsors and the donors and the school. So the coaches can say, hey, there's this kid we really want you to pay this NIL money to, and we can get them. Can you do that, or will you do that? So you still have control. It's just not centralized, in the university fund, I guess is the best way to put it. So I think that's a good thing. Now, I always thought players should get paid for name, image, and likeness. I get paid for name, image, and likeness. I can't run a 4.40. I can't make some of the plays these guys are making. So I think they should be paid for jersey sales and things like that as well. But as far as the structure of the entity reaching out to the players' representation and them doing a deal, I like that so much better. I think that's way more fair market, in my opinion, than the other way around when it's really ran by the state, if we're being honest. As far as SMU, if I'm SMU, I'm demanding reparations, dog. Like that's it. Just like y'all buried them so bad. I need some reparations on that. But no, I like NIL. I like NIL if it's done the right way. You know what I'm saying? Like it hadn't been done the right way because they were just like, here, NIL, just everybody do it. And what happened? Well, it's what happens every time that there's like a free for all. The most powerful entity gets all the power and makes all the decisions, as opposed to it being kind of more spread out. So in that light, like, does it help UCF? Does it hurt UCF? I'll go back to what I said earlier. You either got the money or you don't have the money. That's what it's going to come down to, regardless if it's going to a university general fund or if you're using sponsors and donors to go sponsor a player or try and get this player. And Mike, I think it'll clean a lot of things up on the contract side, because companies aren't going to act like the university. It's not like, hey, here's $1 million to come play with, and you can leave whenever you want, and there's no consequences. What they're going to say is, hey, we're Dr. Pepper. We're going to give you a deal for $2 million to come here and play at this school. But on this contract, it says, you got to stay for at least this amount of time, or you got to pay us our money back. Or if you do something off the field, this may kill Georgia. If you do something off the field, we're going to need our money back. So maybe it'll have a contract structure that asks for both sides, because right now, and our young people need to learn this, you can't just, there's two sides to a contract. You want it in the business. You deserve to get in the business, but there's two sides to the business, and I hope this kind of divvies that out as well.
You raise an interesting point, Jake. When this started, NIL was not to be used as an inducement for enrollment, and now it will be used not only as an inducement, but it will be part of the language probably in the athletic scholarship contract. Right? Because again, you make a good point. If we commit money to you as a university, right, you don't get to just up and transfer whenever you want, or we can demand money back, or we can cut it off. I'm just so interested to see how they end up managing this process. Yeah. But hey, listen, this is going to be an ongoing conversation. I want to thank you for joining me, Jake. Before we get out of here, tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, really easy. Just Google Crane and Company, CRAIN and Company. You'll find us. You can listen to us, watch us, all that stuff, and got a lot of football stuff coming down the pipe.
Guys, thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. For your second listen, go check out our friends over at Locked On Big 12. Our guy Drake Toll leads the conversation in conference realignment news and pulls no punches when it comes to talking about every team in the Big 12, including the UCF Knights. You can find Locked On Big 12 on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.